You may be seated. Allergies have hit my voice this week, so I'm so glad that you're here to share because I'm not sure how long I could go on. But Tim Joy, would you come and share with us? We look forward to hearing.
Timilang, Pakalingwe.
Greetings, brethren.
We are Tim and Joy Coppess, and we are your Church of God missionaries to Botswana, Africa. To give you a little background, I was a science teacher for 20 years in the state of Indiana, and Joy was a preschool teacher for about the same amount of time. God then, after we were doing that area of ministry, we then were called into a pastorate. So I pursued credentialing and then was a pastor of the Church of God in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. As he did a healing work there, he then helped the church to become more outward focused. And as we were working through with them in that, he redirected us into the mission field and called us to Africa. He did that separately but at the same time. We work primarily in areas of discipleship and leadership development and work alongside the church in Botswana. Next. Botswana is a Texas-sized country just north of South Africa. It's covered with the Kalahari Desert. The people speak both English and several different languages. Setswana is one of the major languages that is spoken, and we are being tutored in that. And we work with 5 congregations in the northern part around the Okavango River Delta.
Next. We were sent to Botswana as part of a team. The Stocksdale family is there also. They work with some community outreach, and Abby Stocksdale is the director of the Children of Promise child sponsorship program that the Church of God has. She got worked to get it up and running since mid-2019, and we are thrilled that over 75 children have been sponsored now there. We've seen a great need for that, so we're thrilled with that.
Okay, next. We work in a supportive role and along with them. Jesus is amazing, and he sees the invisible and touches the untouchable. Next. This young man has a tumor on the side of his face, and if you have any abnormalities, then the people of Botswana typically will think that you've been cursed by the local witch doctor. And as a result, they'll either just ignore you or will ostracize, basically. So this young man has been around town. We'd see him, and one time I went into the grocery store, was picking up a few items, and as I did, I saw there were 2 lines open. So I went to the short one. Then I realized why it was short. It was because he was in line and everybody had moved to the other one. He looked back to see if I was going to join the others, but I stayed and just told him, "Hello, sir." He bought his items, and the cashier didn't even want to touch the money that he was giving them. But he purchased them, and then we had opportunity to go ahead and interact. He had shoes that were split out in the back of the heel area, and so we went ahead and gave him a few different items, gathered some toiletries, some shoes I had, and some shirts, and just try to help a little bit. But he didn't know what to think with being acknowledged, let alone being talked to and treated like a human being. So that was, again, an opportunity that God provided for us to demonstrate his hands and feet to people, not just in the church, but also in the community, because the church has to be having an impact in the community. Next.
Each one of us has a mission field. We are in Botswana But like Tim said, the schools used to be our mission field. Wherever you're working or around, we are all to be ambassadors of Christ, and we each have a call to make disciples. Jesus said, go make disciples. And that takes some investment, working to mentor and disciple other people in Christ. Next. In the church where we attend there in Botswana, there were about 5 young ladies who really desired to be growing and mentored. So I started a Bible study with them in our home. And I began by really talking about how God often reveals himself and his character throughout the Bible through different names. One of the young ladies, Lydia, was excited one day, and she came and she said, next, I'll do that. She said, God revealed himself to me 3 different times this week as Jehovah Jireh, or the God who provides. She went on to say how during the week at 3 different times she had found a coin. The 5 pula coin to us is really about 50 cents. But with that, she, in her words, was able to provide a complete meal for her family. In other words, she was able to have some kind of side dish to go along with the basic maize meal starch that makes up most of their meal. With the 1 pula coin, she was able to purchase matches, and she was needing those, and many of them cook outside over an open fire. With the 2 pula coin she found at the end of the week, her sons had not had anything to eat for breakfast. She was able to purchase some menguinha, which are fried dough balls. And it thrilled us to see her growth and how, even in her meager circumstances, she was able to see God was the one who was providing for her needs and to give thanks to him.
Next. We really have embraced Henry Blackaby's teaching from experiencing God. Look and see where God's at work and join in. That's how we participated and got started with the young ladies in the discipleship group. And then after we went through the discipleship training together, we then had a few books of the Maxicados on grace. So we gave each of them a copy. That was the first book that many of them had that was theirs to mark in or do anything like that. So it was rather interesting on that. And it was also very cool for them to learn about grace. The grace that saves us, and then also the grace that sustains us. And they were the ones who remarked about that they could see that God's sustaining grace was what kept Joy going, as she had lost her mom back in September 2020, and then wasn't able to go back until more recently. But it was wonderful to see the spiritual growth that these young ladies are growing and doing. So again, they're taking on leadership roles, and it's just wonderful as to be able to invest in them. Next.
During the lockdown that happened during COVID-19, we weren't just sitting around doing nothing. We worked to create a 28-step discipleship training curriculum. And we found that it really wanted to get a good, solid foundation for them, a biblical foundation. It used a lot of scripture. We had opportunities for a lot of discussion time, opportunities for them to share their testimony and share about how God was at work in their life and how they saw him currently moving in their lives. We worked with training 3 small groups. The ladies' discipleship group was one of them. They wanted to do that. And then the Kubung branch and the Boseja branch were 2 other branches that we worked with in the church. We did about 10% of the church membership in training, with the understanding that there would be discipleship multiplication happening. In other words, they understood from the beginning that as they walk through this training, then at the end, they would be finding somebody to invest in and mentor and disciple so that the discipleship could be continuing. So pictured here are some from the Boseja branch.
We emphasized that they did not have to know everything about being a disciple before they could be mentoring someone else. And along with that, they received a certificate of completion, and we held a commissioning service where they were then publicly sent to go ahead and be mentoring someone else. And they received also a Bible that was purchased using money from the Kentucky CWC. Next.
We are thrilled that these two women, Ma Putaloho from Kubung branch and Mama Nyanga from the Boseja branch, they have been active in mentoring some others, and they felt very honored, actually, as we talked to them before we headed back to the United States for our home assignment, and asked them to then oversee the discipleship training. So they are checking with people, you know, asking, who are you discipling and how is that going? And kind of checking in and encouraging that. So we're thrilled that even when we're not around, that discipleship is continuing. And that's really the goal of all that we do, is for them then it to be self-sustaining and for them to take ownership and be leading.
Next. We've taken part in all different aspects of church life and working with preaching. We've been parts of wedding ceremonies, been parts of funeral ceremonies, and just being a part of the church in general. Next. One of the neat aspects was we had the opportunity to be praying with our current pastor and current bishop, Curtis Molopisi, and his wife Magdalene. They were having troubles conceiving and carrying a baby to full term. But during one of those times when we were praying, I felt God really emphasizing that they were going to be having a baby. So I know that that's something you do not say lightly, but I spoke out in faith, believing God, and shared with them that within a year they'd be having a baby. I really believe that that was what I was hearing. And I want to introduce you to Bernice Mosa Jowett. And Mosa means grace in Botswana. And that's her. Next. There's Magdalene and Curtis as we conducted the child dedication. And then next, we gave them a certificate of child dedication as well. So it was, again, helping them to be able to see how God works, to hear his voice, to be recognizing it, and then to be bold and stepping out in faith to speak. Next.
The church in Botswana faces many challenges, one of which is sexual purity. This is an example of a Western-style wedding. Her father was a Church of God minister, and that passed away. Her name's Kay, and we attended their wedding. But it is difficult for many of the Botswana people. First of all, it's difficult to find jobs and decent paying jobs, especially up in the area where we live. And with that, the cost, there's two types of weddings. There's the Western style wedding, but to be legally married in Botswana, there's a bride price you have to pay. Many of the couples are not getting married until closer to age 40. That's a long time to wait. And the reason being, part of it at least, is the cost. For a groom to be married, his uncle has to go negotiate with the bride's side of the family. And anywhere from 4 up to 12, no more than 12. In fact, the government has set a limit of no more than 12 cows for the bride price. The cows being about 3,000 pula each. To us, that's close to $300 each, but in their economy, that's like having 2 or 3 years worth of wages have to be just set back in order just to pay the bride price. Then you have to prove that you have a job well enough to support your wife. And unlike here, it ends up, we learned, the responsibility of the groom to be the one who pays for the wedding cost. So the cost of the wedding, people traveling in, he's responsible for that. He also has to get the bride's mom and dad and aunts and uncles and whatever, new suits and dresses and everything. So there's a huge cost to it. That being the case, there's many just kind of give up on the idea of marriage. And even in the church, they struggle with some shacking up. So that's a challenge, really, in sexual purity that the church is facing.
Okay, next. After having been there for 3 years, we've learned more about some other social problems they've had. Abuse has been a major problem, and there have been some different murder-suicides among some of the different people, and because of some of the social situations, there's been some difficulties where we learned in January and February of 2021, so in the first 2 months of this year, we learned in the district in which we live, which is about the size of Indiana, that there were 500 documented cases of children in standards 5 through high school who are pregnant. Now that's basically 10-year-olds through high school. 500 in just that one district. How does the church address that? The church has to be relevant and face those difficulties along with the people. This is actually a picture from a meeting where some different churches were getting together and discussing how are we going to approach this. And the youth are viewed by the government to be those from 18 to 35 years of age. The youth have more recently dealt with this, so they are the ones taking responsibility to go into the schools and encourage the others to abstain and to be able to make it through. And then the adults are then working in support of them. Now, COVID-19 actually complicated things because of the lockdowns. And when the lockdown happened, many of the people were then at their cattle posts. Some of the men, like the uncles, sometimes the fathers, stepfathers, uncles, or just other adult men, might take advantage of the young ladies. Then we also learned from one of the community members that sometimes in some of the villages, the mothers may very well tell the 10-year-olds, be looking for a man to go ahead and take care of you because of the insecurity of the situation. So there's a lot of heartache out there. And so the church is working to address those and to help out. But that's one of the parts that can be quite challenging. So your prayers do encourage us as we are helping to address it. Also, we, along with the leaders in the church, have actually had to address abuse within the church, saying it's not okay ever to be threatening your girlfriend or your wife. And there's a lot of gender-based violence, and the government is even addressing that too as well. Next.
We work with different age groups. We had the youth over for, this is the Boseja youth, over for a movie night. And they chose to watch the movie War Room. If you're familiar with that, had a lot of good interaction, discussion from that. You do see some children there because of some of the situations. We do have some single moms who, unfortunately, many of the men are not in the picture.
Next. The Kubung youth chose to watch Courageous. And that's a fairly heavy movie by some of what it addresses. And there was good discussion. And as we were talking, I shared that I lost my father when I was just 2.5 years old. I didn't even realize it at the time, but many of the youth, because of the lack of fathers in their families, immediately connected. So there was a bonding that occurred. And this is the first time we had met a few of the individuals. As the movie finished and everyone was getting ready to then go on back to the vehicle to be taken home, one of the young ladies hung back, and she then confided in us and told us that she had been raped. She had told the police, but she did not tell church leadership. So we then asked and got permission to share with the leadership about what had happened. But the way God works is very profound. We then had the opportunity that Sunday we were going to go worship at the Kubung church. And as we walked in, we saw that she was sitting over there, and we didn't even think about it, but we went and sat down beside her. That little simple act to show that we're not ashamed to be associated with her was very encouraging to her. And that's one of the major roles that we have, is to just encourage the church. Next. I also was blessed to be able to be a part of the baptism of 11 different individuals, and I learned that she had requested that I be one of the participants in baptizing her as well. Next.
We also work with some of the older people. On the left, you see Dr. Lacow. She was one of the first members, one of the early members in the church back in the 1960s when Jim and Mary Nip went to Botswana and planted the Church of God there. She, back in those days, that was before the schools were really around. Currently, the schools teach English. It's a British English, and they teach the main tribal language, Setswana, which we are learning. Back then, that wasn't happening, and she has been recognized and noted for her work in literacy. She actually used the Bible in helping teach some of the literacy, so that was kind of cool. She is a former bishop, so the Church of God there has women, recognizes women as ministers, and we have Pastor Patricia in the Shirobi church that's about a half an hour drive north of Botswana, Mound, where we live. On the right, you see Muruti Mongwe, and he is one of the Muruti means pastor. He is one of the pastors, and he has recently worked to start up a Bible study in both the Kubung and the Boseja branches, and has really been on fire for wanting to see more discipleship and growth happening in the churches.
Okay, next. One of the exciting things that we get to do in the next term of 3 years will be to work especially in areas of leadership development, including helping some different individuals investigate pastoral calls. We have between 5 to 10 different individuals that we are currently working with. And on the left, you see Swelelo. He's a young man that's been a leader of the Boseja youth. And as we have opportunities, we'll have them actually practice and be able to share some sermons. So they're getting practical training on that even. But the first time Swelelo was to preach, he chickened out, as he put it. And so that's where you basically trust the Holy Spirit, and you also keep a sermon in your back pocket. But he was faithful to go ahead and do. But rather than scolding him, it was just, again, a simple encouragement saying, Swelelo, God's got a message he really wants you to be sharing. And he then came back the next Sunday and preached a really powerful sermon. So it's exciting to see the confidence grow as they hear and as they are recognizing God's voice and then following in obedience.
The couple on the right that you see is KK and Tubby Kalahosi. KK is the pastor of the Kubung branch. Tubby is the assistant to Abby Stocksdale, working with the Children of Promise program. But she's also one who has felt the pastoral call and is interested in more training and credentialing. We have heard her preach some different times, and she is probably one of the most gifted preachers there in the Church of God in Botswana. So we're thankful to see their growth and their leadership. Next.
As we do the training, we want to try to disseminate the information as smoothly as possible. The internet data and then also printing of hard copies is all very expensive. So we wanted to go ahead and find a way to help get that information to the members when we do training or when they then continue with other things. We learned through our neighbors who work with Lutheran Bible translators about this little device. It's called Lightstream Pocket, and we have had a couple of churches give us funds to be able to purchase some of these to be able to use. They are a cell phone-sized device which basically creates its own hotspot. It stores a library of information, of documents, as well as video clips that we could put on there. It's supposed to be easy to use, so we're going to use Joy as the guinea pig to help make sure that it works.
Anybody can.
And so with that, when we have 10 to 15 people gathered, then they can, with their cell phones, they can connect directly to that and have the information streamed directly to their phones, and it does not use data or any other type of external cost. And if you have even the dumb phones, the ones that are flip phones that open up and things like that, we also have some micro SD cards that we can then insert into those and be able to provide the training through those phones as well. So it's going to be exciting to be able to work with them. They can then use these devices also when they have their annual meetings and want to share the reports and other informations. They can go ahead and put that on there, as well as when we put the past training plus then future training. And when they develop training, they'll be able to do that as well. So it's going to have an ongoing effect from that.
We brought with us some Egemeyer Bible story books and gave some to the children's Sunday school teachers. They really didn't have any curriculum there. The teachers were just trying to maybe tell a story from the Bible or whatever. We are wanting to work with doing some more training in the future and help with some curriculum. One thing that we ask prayer for is that with COVID, when there was the shutdowns, the lockdowns and everything, the government said the children couldn't come to to Sunday school, couldn't come to church. So the schools were closed for a little bit. Then when they reopened, the government wasn't having the children come back to church, to the Sunday school classes. It's been really over a year, and we're concerned about the spiritual development of these children. And it's been kind of frustrating. Shortly before we came back to the States in April, some of the church leaders, and ours were involved also, but we're working with the government trying to say, you need to allow our children to come back. And they were working to get that to happen. Actually, that just had happened. And then shortly after that, there was another huge spike in the cases of COVID cases. Schools shut down again, and then, the children aren't, there's been a lot of limits on, even how many can be at church services and stuff. So please pray that things will settle down, that the children can get back to church, can get back for some discipleship and training. That's been a burden on our hearts, and we just ask for prayer for that.
Okay, next. It's amazing how God works and puts people in our lives. The lady on the left is Kelly, and when the lockdown first occurred, they declared a state of emergency, and then we literally had basically a day warning, and then you would have to go ahead and apply online for a permit to be able to go out and get food, groceries, or anything else that might be needed, including medicine. So we were fortunate that we could go ahead and stock up, but many people only buy the food every 3 days, something like that. So we went ahead and thought, it just came to us, hey, we need to go ahead and check up with how the church members are doing. And so we asked the church leadership for a list of some individuals who most likely would need the food the most. And then also asked for a list of items to buy, because they would be the ones to know what would really be needed. So they did provide both of those. And then it's a matter of how in the world do we go out and get the groceries, and how do we get to the people? That's where God had already put the plans in place. Kelly works as the office manager for a security company. Through her work, she is in direct contact with the district commissioner, who then grants permits. She then approached him and said, hey, this family is wanting to try to help get food to community members. So the district commissioner granted a permit for me for 5 days, and then I could travel during that time to take the food around, that type of thing. And typically you would get a permit once every 3 weeks, and then it would be for 4 hours. And the first time we got one, there was only 45 minutes left. So to get a permit that was good for a whole week, and to be able to travel anytime during that time, was quite a substantial change. So we bought the food items and packaged them up into pairs, and we put the 2 Corinthians 9:8 in both English and in Botswana. And as we delivered it, we then explained what that meant. Is God's providing for you with this set, and then in the abundance, he's also providing a set for you to then share with somebody else that needs the food. So God provides. And again, it's an opportunity for us to buy the food on behalf of the church, and that's part of how we do some of our tithe as well. But it's really neat to see how God was working behind the scenes in a way that we didn't even think about long before we actually were able to, serve and join in.
And this young lady actually is not a member of the church. Met her in the community and she learned that we were missionaries, and she had asked for a Bible. We had actually purchased a Bible for her, built a friendship and maintained that with friendship with her. And then it was, during the COVID time, then that God was using that and using her work and working through her to be able to help out for the church and people in the community. So God is at work throughout. We again, like Tim said earlier, look to see where God's at work and join in, and opportunities for us to be able to be his hands and feet. Next. We want you to know that you can have a kingdom impact in Botswana through prayers that you offer and through regular recurring gifts. Our budget is really set up based upon recurring gifts that will happen, whether it's monthly, given quarterly, once a year, however it's given, but in a recurring manner. We're planning to return for another 3 years in Botswana. And if God is laying that on your heart, if your church, the church here, would love to invite you to partner with us. It can be some small groups. Individuals or families can partner with us. And we've even had some that have said, we determined what we spend eating a meal out. And once a month, we've chosen to put that money and send to Botswana. So we just want to welcome you to do that. If you're interested, we'll be having the fellowship time, the meet and greet, and let us know. We'd love to talk to you and give you information about how that can happen. If you'd like to have an emailed newsletter given every month or 2 months, then we can give you that. We can have you sign up in there too. But just want to say, along with the people from the church in Botswana, Rea Laboha.
We're thanking you.
And Medimo Ale Seofatse.
God bless you all.
Thank you.